and welcome to Indus News live from Islamabad. I'm Hira Mustafa and these are the headlines. India has reported more than 300,000 coronavirus cases for the 12th straight day as its caseload approaches 20 million. The country has registered nearly 370,000 infections and more than 3,400 deaths in the past 24 hours. In Pakistan, 79 people have lost their lives to the virus, while over 4,200 tested positive overnight. Globally, the coronavirus has claimed over 3.2 million lives and infected more than 152 million people so far. In Bangladesh, at least 26 people have died after a speedboat collided with a sand-laden bulk carrier and sank in the Padma River near Madripur district. Police officials say 5 people have been rescued, while several others are still missing. The Saudi-led Arab coalition says it has intercepted a ballistic missile and 2 armed drones launched by Yemen's Houthi rebels. In a statement, the coalition said the projectiles were aimed at the southern Saudi city of Najran, but the Houthis claimed they targeted the Najran airport and King Khalid Air Base with 2 ballistic missiles and 4 drones. Turkey says its armed forces have killed 7 PKK militants during an anti-terror operation in northern Iraq. At a press briefing, Defense Minister Hulusi Akar said the Turkish commandos raided a cave and killed the militants. He added the forces also seized a huge cache of arms and advanced ammunition. And in tennis, Albert Ramos Vinolas has collected his 3rd ATP Tour title by winning the Estoril Open in Portugal. The 7-seeded Spaniard beats Britain's Cameron Norrie 4-6, 6-3 and 7-6 in the final. Well, these were the headlines. News in detail coming after the short break. Stay with us. Welcome back. Now the news in detail. India has reported more than 300,000 coronavirus cases for the 12th straight day, with the caseload approaching 20 million. Globally, the virus has claimed 3 million lives and infected more than 152 million people so far. More in this report.
The end of the pandemic seems horrifyingly far as the world continues to report almost 1 million cases every day. The latest Gallup survey shows 1 in every 2 people worldwide saw their earnings drop due to the fallout. Activists are warning of India like oxygen shortages in Bangladesh, Ethiopia and other countries. They have called for significant international efforts to ensure all countries have sufficient oxygen supplies. Over in India, crematoriums burn through the night to keep up demand as the health system buckles under pressure. The country registered nearly 370,000 infections and more than 3,400 deaths in the past 24 hours. The highly infectious COVID-19 variant first found in India was most recently detected in Malaysia. The US has pledged to negotiate with the World Trade Organization on ways to overcome intellectual property issues for a wider distribution of vaccines. Elsewhere, in a unique and rather shocking study, the English city of Liverpool hosted a one-off music festival to test whether significant events spread COVID-19. Nearly 5,000 people took off their masks and dished social distancing rules in the name of science and music.
Pakistan has reported 79 COVID-19 deaths and over 4,200 infections in the past 24 hours. The Health Ministry says the nationwide death toll has risen to 18,149. Pakistan has recorded more than 834,000 cases since the pandemic began. More than 728,000 people have recovered so far. Officials say the number of active cases is approaching 88,000. Meanwhile, the positivity rate of coronavirus cases stands at 9.16%. Meanwhile, Planning Minister Asad Umar says the need for caution in Pakistan remains high as the next few weeks are critical. A top U.S. military officer says Afghan forces face an uncertain future against the Taliban as the foreign troops began withdrawing. In an interview with the U.S. media, the Chairman Joint Chief of Staff, General Mark Milley, warned of bad possible outcomes. The general described the Afghan military as well equipped and well trained, but declined to say they're fully ready to stand up to the Taliban without direct international backing. Milley added a negotiated settlement between Kabul and the Taliban is still possible. He also talked about the potential of complete withdrawal before the September 11th deadline. The U.S. has urged all parties to support efforts for an inclusive political settlement in Afghanistan. U.S. Special Envoy Zalmay Khalilzad said this after meeting with Uzbek Foreign Minister Abdul Aziz Kamilov in Tashkent. In a tweet, Khalilzad said the two sides agreed that Afghan, regional and international stakeholders must play their part. He stressed the need to end the 40-year-old war in Afghanistan. The envoy said Uzbekistan and the U.S. have also agreed to bolster their trade and economic ties. In Bangladesh, at least 26 people have died after a speedboat collided with a sand-laden bulk carrier and sank in Padma River near Madaripur district. Police officials say 5 people have been rescued, while several others are still missing. They said the speedboat was en route to Bangla Bazar from Shimulia Ferry Ghat, carrying over 30 passengers. Police say the rescue operation is still underway. Hundreds of people die each year in ferry accidents in the country due to extensive inland waterways and lax safety standards. At least 11 people have drowned after a boat carrying 24 Europe-bound migrants capsized off Libya. The UN's Migration Agency says the Libyan Coast Guard rescued 12 migrants near western Zawiya town. It also called for an urgent change in approach to the situation around Libya and the central Mediterranean. The International Organization for Migration says around 7,000 migrants were returned to Libya so far this year. The Saudi-led Arab coalition says it has intercepted a ballistic missile and 2 armed drones launched by Yemen's Houthi rebels. In a statement, the coalition said the projectiles were aimed at the southern Saudi city of Najran. But the Houthis claimed they targeted the Najran airport and King Khalid Air Base with 2 ballistic missiles and 4 drones. Meanwhile, the battle between coalition-backed Yemeni forces and Houthi rebels rages on for Yemen's oil-rich Marib province. A coalition spokesperson said Yemen troops have seized several mountainous locations near Marib after fierce clashes. Israeli forces have shot dead a Palestinian woman, accusing her of attempting a stabbing attack. Palestinian state media says the 60-year-old woman died of her wounds at a junction near Bethlehem city. They said occupying troops also wounded 5 Palestinians in Nablus city in the northwest bank. Eyewitnesses say soldiers raided Beit Town and wounded 3 Palestinians with live bullets and another 2 with plastic bullets. Meanwhile, Hamas has warned Israel against evicting Palestinians in East Jerusalem. Prime Minister Mohammed Shataya has called on the EU to pressure Israel to allow elections to be held in East Jerusalem. Turkey says its armed forces have killed 7 PKK militants during an anti-terror operation in northern Iraq. At a press briefing, Defense Minister Hulusi Akar said the Turkish commandos raided a cave and killed the militants. He said the cave needed special techniques to enter, which Turkish special forces accomplished without any loss. Hulusi Akar visited the operation zones in Iraq along with high-level military officials to monitor developments. He said the number of neutralized terrorists in Iraq has reached 53, while 7 Turkish soldiers have also died. The defense minister added the forces also seized a huge cache of arms and advanced ammunition. Myanmar's one of the most powerful rebel groups says it has shot down a government helicopter. The information wing of the Kachin Independence Army reported heavy casualties on both sides. Meanwhile, anti-group protesters have again gathered in different cities and vowed to defy any order from the junta. A large number of people also gathered in the town of Lokoi marking the global Myanmar Spring Revolution. The US, the European Union and 15 other countries have demanded the release of media workers in Myanmar. According to an advocacy group, at least 765 people have been killed in the crackdown on dissent so far. Chad's ruling military council has named a transitional government after the death of President Idriss Deby. But leading opposition figures have rejected the interim government, calling it the continuation of an old order. A military spokesperson said Deby's son, Mohammed, has named 40 ministers and deputy ministers. In a statement, he said the new National Reconciliation Ministry will be led by Sheikh Ibn Umar, a former rebel chief. The opposition says the new setup will not go far as long as Chad doesn't have a civilian president and a military vice president. Thousands took to the streets last week in protest against the military rule, and at least 6 died in clashes with police. New Zealand says differences with China are becoming extremely harder to reconcile as Beijing's rule changes. Prime Minister Jacinda Ardern was speaking at the China Business Summit in Auckland. Ardern said there were areas in which China and New Zealand cannot and will not agree. But these differences need not define their bilateral relationship. She called on Beijing to act more responsibly as a growing power. Ardern's comments follow pressure from the West over Wellington's reluctance to use the Five Eyes alliance against China. The Press Freedom Day is being observed across the world today to advance transparency and empowerment. This report has more.
The theme of this year's World Press Freedom Day is information as a public good, which serves as a call to affirm the importance of cherishing information as a public entity. The day is being marked at a time when the economic impact of the pandemic has hit many media outlets hard, threatening their survival. The UN Secretary General Antonio Guterres says free and independent journalism is our greatest ally in combating misinformation and disinformation.
As budget tightens, so too does access to reliable information. Rumors, falsehoods and extreme or divisive opinions surge in to fill the gap. I urge all governments to do everything in their power to support a free, independent and diverse media.
Since 1989, 19 journalists have been killed in the line of duty in the Indian-occupied Jammu and Kashmir, while many others have been wounded and detained. The U.S. Secretary of State Antony Blinken condemned government-imposed internet shutdowns which prevent freedom of expression. The Press Freedom Day has been celebrated since it was proclaimed by the UN General Assembly in 1993.
More news stories coming up after the short break. Stay with us. Welcome back. Sydney has been enveloped in hazardous bushfire smoke as authorities carry out controlled forest burning. Ferries have been cancelled and the city's 5 million residents were told to stay indoors. Fire services were forced to scale back plans for further burns as pollution reached hazardous levels. Levels of hazardous PM2.5 pollution are among the worst in the world at more than 190 on the Air Quality Index. The smoke is forecast to clear as the day progresses. A giant piece of artwork by Britain's David Hockney is lighting up several of the world's largest digital billboards. It is meant to inspire hope after a year of on-off lockdown. More in this report.
You might be sick of off-screens, but this is one virtual event you don't want to miss. Celebrated British artist David Hockney is bringing a new sun to 5 cities around the world. It will be shown once a day for the month of May in London, New York, Tokyo, Seoul, and Los Angeles. The organizers say the work called Remember You Cannot Look at the Sun or Death for Very Long is a symbol of hope and collaboration. As the world awakens from its lockdowns to protect populations from COVID-19, the artwork has already been emblazoned across the iconic billboard of London's Piccadilly Circus.
I don't really know if it inspired a lot, to be honest, but it's just a bit of light, really, and I think at the moment it's just that sunshine thing just feels good with lockdown hopefully easing up.
The global event coincides with the release of Hockney's new book Spring Cannot Be Cancelled and his Royal Academy exhibition, The Arrival of Spring, Normandy 2020, which will open in London on 23rd of May.
In Bangladesh capital Dhaka, volunteers have been providing free Ramadan meals to the poor amid the financially burdening COVID-19 lockdown. Details in this report.
Dozens of people could be seen queuing by midday in Dhaka to pick up iftar, the meal that Muslims eat after sundown to break their fast during Ramadan. A charity in Bangladesh named Mehman Khana, or Food for Guests, is providing these free meals.
I'm fasting. I pull my rickshaw under the sun, but I make very little earnings, and I'm too poor to buy iftar. So I have come here for free food and park my rickshaw by the road.
The charity has been cooking up free meals since March last year, during the country's first coronavirus lockdown. According to the volunteers, they have managed to arrange food for around 1,000 people daily, despite funding issues.
Last year, when there was a lockdown, due to the spread of the coronavirus, we started this program. We have our funding from our family, who pay a portion of their annual earnings to the poor and from their savings. We try to run this program for the whole year, and for those who were doing daily labor, rickshaw drivers, and the poor living on the streets who have no earnings.
Bangladesh's current lockdown, which was triggered by rising cases, started on April 5th and was recently extended to May 5th.
In Spain, fans cheered as Matadors returned to the Madrid bullring for the first time since the beginning of the pandemic. Details in the following report.
Carrying red and yellow flowers to show bullfighting as a symbol of Spanish culture, the fans watched Matadors taking on 7 bulls at Madrid's Las Ventas bullring. The charity contest was organized to raise money for jobless bullfighters and other workers in the sector. A maximum of 6,000 people were allowed at the event, equivalent to 40% capacity at the arena. Almost all of Spain's bull rings or plazas remained closed during the last year due to the lockdown restrictions, plunging the controversial spectacle and its matadors into a financial crisis. Spaniards are divided over the bloody sport, with some considering it an art form, while others viewing it as cruel. Bullfighting's popularity has declined in recent years. It has met opposition from an increasingly powerful animal rights movement and some left-wing councils that refuse to pay for bull festivals.
European stocks have edged up on the first trading day of May, with the UK closed for the public holiday. Italy's FTSE MIB leading the gains, rising over 0.5%. Frankfurt's DAX has also gained nearly 0.5%, while the Pan-European Stock 600, the CAC 40 in Paris, have gained marginally. Earlier, Asian markets also gained modestly, with Japanese and mainland Chinese markets closed for holidays. In the English Premier League, Arsenal beat Newcastle United 2-0 at St James Park. The Gunners opened the scoring in the 5th minute with Mohamed El-Neni's first league goal for the side. Pierre-Emerick Aubameyang doubled the lead in the second half. Steve Bruce's Newcastle lost Fabian Schär to a red card after a late challenge. They remain 9 points above the relegation zone with 4 games remaining, while Arsenal moved back above Aston Villa into 9th place in the table. Meanwhile, Manchester United's match against Liverpool was postponed after fans forced their way into the stadium. Now it's time to have a look at the weather update across the globe. For the latest updates, you can follow us on social media at indus.news.